This episode of the Move Mind podcast was brought to you by CBD Mountain, the sport and fitness CBD. Head over to cbdmountain.com for a range of soft gels, skin balms, oils, and vapes, and purchase online and have the premium quality CBD delivered directly to your door. cbdmountain.com. Thanks for tuning into the Move Mind podcast. My guest today is Brandon Harris, a personal trainer, coach, and co-owner of Premier Fitness Systems based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Brandon, thanks so much for coming on the show, mate.
Yeah, appreciate it, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know stuff's all a bit crazy still around the world with COVID. So, nice one for finding some time. I appreciate that because I know gym owners everywhere are scrambling to get stuff back together.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the game, isn't it? Nature of the beast. Brandon, I wonder if we could start talking about sort of the educational route. Now, I know you studied kinesiology at Arizona State University. Was it back in 2004-ish?
Yeah, I'm kind of an OG, man. I feel like I woke up one day and I got a full gray beard and I'm almost 40. So I graduated in, I think it was actually 03 from ASU. So yeah, I've been in the game for a while,
Yeah, nice. And I know kinesiology is an interesting kind of degree in the sense of, at least in the Americas, it kind of covers a lot of bases when it comes to the sort of the physiology of the human body and training and stuff like that. How do you think studying for that, I mean, I know it's a while ago now, prepared you for the work that you do now? Did it set you up with a good kind of foundation and stuff like that for training and coaching people?
Yeah, I think so. I think I look at college as it's one of these things that it's almost just a test of perseverance. Like people that can get through it, I think it does say something about their work ethic. Not always, because I've met plenty great people that don't have a college degree. I think kinesiology for me definitely established a base, but I've probably the majority of the really cool stuff and the really good stuff has come post college. But without that background, without that base, I probably would have had more work to catch up on for sure.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, because perseverance. It's true. You get through a 3 or 4 year degree, it does say something about your character, doesn't it? Did you start your personal training journey whilst you were studying for your degree, or is that something that came after?
I did, yeah. So it's kind of a funny story. My business partner, who I've known since college, is a couple years older, and I worked at a bar getting through school, so I just kind of worked nights and did everything from DJ to bar back to bartender to bounce. And loved the gym, and I was always in the gym. And I was doing an internship with a PhD student at the time that was working at Athletes Performance, which is now Exos. And my roommate was studying to be a firefighter. He was friends with my current business partner, and he actually got me my first job. So I started working as a trainer at a 24-hour fitness when I was still in school. So I would get up at like 4 in the morning and take clients for, I think I'd take like a 5, 6 and, 7 a.m. client, go to school, and then sometimes come back. So I probably got about a year or so in before I just basically took that over full time.
Yeah, wow. So in the trenches early on, then getting
Yeah.
stuck in. What was it that drew you to wanting to work with people on the training front?
I'd always loved fitness. So I grew up playing sports, and I think my first draw to it was probably like most young men, is it's like an aesthetic thing, and you're looking for attention. For me, it was even like I wanted to get stronger so I could like kind of protect myself. That was a part of it. I went to a middle school where I was actually the minority, and I was the only white kid on the basketball team, and I got picked on a little bit. So I came home and started curling buckets of rocks, and then my dad got me a weight set. Fell into that. My body started to change, fell in love with that. And as an athlete, it was always very interesting to me how I could take training and performance and then piggyback that into being a better athlete. And I, early on was way off, right? Because you just think it's bicep curls, it's bench press, it's those things. And when I was no longer able to play sports, that's just kind of what I fell into. I fell into the gym, became my my thing. It became my sport. So I've loved it for a long time for sure.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. And were there any sort of breakthrough lessons that stood out to you early on? Like if you look back on those times at the sort of the Anytime Fitness 24-hour fitness gym when you were studying, is there anything that you look back on you think, oh blimey, I've come a long way since then, or any lessons that you learned early on that maybe still stick with you today?
Yeah, I mean, I think like everything's a lesson, right? If you allow it to be. But I'd say the early personal training days, because to me, personal training is, it is a little bit different than it is different than being a strength coach or a coach. I like to think of even training now as coaching because I think coaching is a higher level. Like if you approach it from that viewpoint, but I think the commercial gyms, the big benefit there was the business skills, the managing a schedule, understanding selling, and understanding relationships. Because like as a personal trainer, everything is about that. And we've had people that would join our team that don't come from that background, and I have to remember that they were never in that environment. I don't agree with those models where it's all about sales. I don't think that makes sense. But at the same time, you have to sell your service. You have to believe in your service. So I feel pretty grateful to be exposed to that. That I understood lead tracking. I understood lead generation. Very much in that environment, you're responsible for your success. So like, nobody's going to necessarily give you clients. Like it's go get them. And I think that helped me be more successful as I progressed in my career.
Yeah, fantastic. There is a business element to it, isn't there? That a lot of people don't really realize, I think, until they're in the actual gym themselves working. Like, I don't know how much they put into the courses now on the business side of things, but there's a massive business component. You're right, with lead generation and sales. And did you learn that mostly by kind of trial and error and just being at the gym, or did you have like mentors that kind of showed you the ropes a little bit?
Yeah, I had that first gym I worked at. We had a really cool team, and I think there was like a core group of maybe 8 of us that still are interacting. Uh, Two of the other guys have gyms themselves, so like we had a really cool group. Very young, early 20s. My business partner now, he was always he's very business savvy, and I remember like sitting down with him and be like, "You need people like they'll keep paying you." They'll sign up for this like over and over again. I remember like specifically asking him because it didn't register that somebody was going to pay me whatever it was to train them, and that they would stick with you for years. Um, and we had a fitness manager early on that was kind of an asshole of a guy, but at the same time he demanded you to kind of a certain level of excellence with like following up with clients and how the systems there would apply to your success. So I think that was big to just understand like, okay, every person is a potential lead, and ultimately for me, every person is somebody that I can help. Like I struggled with sales initially because I looked at it as like I was selling somebody something, and I almost wasn't comfortable with that. But when I flipped it and I realized I believe that I can help people, and the only way I can help them is to get them as clients, selling became easy because it just became me being honest. Like, I believe I can help you achieve your goals. And the only way you get a client is you've got to get them in, you've got to sit them down, you've got to have a system in place to follow up with them. So I think I'd learned that early on, that was a huge part of ultimately helping more people, was being organized from that standpoint.
Yeah, fantastic. Like reframing the sales, yeah, interaction. That's really interesting. I know exactly what you mean. I've struggled myself as well on the selling front. I've worked for commercial gyms in my early youth, and same kind of thing. I don't feel comfortable pushing this on people, but I like how you flip that, and then it's not about pushing anything. It's just I believe I can do something that's going to help you. Yeah, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden
yeah.
you're comfortable, aren't you? You're more comfortable with expressing what it is you can bring to the table. Yeah,
100%. I mean, I have this thing now. It's like I want to minimize, if probably eventually get to a place where I don't have to be strategic in any relationship. Like, right, where I'm not like thinking I'm going to compliment this person because I want something back. I want these authentic connections and relationships, that's something I'm striving for in my life. And I really believe that, being authentic, people crave that, like authentic connection, whether they realize it or not, and learning how to just project that, hey, I care about your success, and being okay charging for that. There's nothing wrong with that. So, for me, that's something that I still am very aware of. Like, I don't want to be strategic. I want to be able to be myself. I want to care about people. I want, relationships to be reciprocated for the right reasons. And yeah, I think that's a big piece of it too. I think there are probably people that can be successful with things with not being that way, but I don't want to be involved in that. Like, I don't want to be a politician. I don't want to have to navigate and manage those things. I want to just be able to care about people and help them. So
Yeah, absolutely. Authenticity is a bit of an ambiguous path, isn't it? There's not really a how-to guide on how to be authentic as such.
yeah.
What are some of the things that you've kind of realized that help you to stay kind of truer to yourself, to who you are? Because I mean, in our industry, like there's a lot of like you said, aesthetics is very often what brings people in the door. Now you could argue that aesthetics is perhaps a bit more of a shallow goal, and you get a certain kind of crowd of people that are like, yeah, man, I just want to flex and look good. And it's like, well, you don't want to kind of match them on that level. You want to be yourself and be like, yeah, we can do that if you want. But how have you kind of found like being authentic in the gym world when so often people are inauthentic? It's not straightforward, is it really?
Yeah. I think like a lot of things, it's a never ending process. It's like that, you're always a beginner. You're always trying to grow and evolve. I think, a mindfulness practice has been huge. Meditation, that's a big piece of that, is of being able to be in the moment and be present and tap into that, and lose the ego and not be driven by those things. Viewing training from a performance standpoint, from a health standpoint, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good. There are still elements of that in my existence, but I try not to let it be the dominant variable. Because I think at some point it is empty, it's shallow, it can only go so far. Then what? When you make training about performance and achieving goals, and then the systems in place to achieve those goals, I think that can drive growth and advancement in all aspects of your life, versus like just looking at, like, I'm just trying to look good. Like, that can only go so far. So when I figured that out, that was huge for myself personally, but then I think also with clients, because I think people are drawn to that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there's a stronger attraction to someone, like you say, who's authentic versus someone who can just say, "Yeah, I'll make you look good." You pick up on it, don't you? Subliminally, I think you just pick up when somebody is the real deal. Yeah, and you
Yep.
touched upon meditation now. I think that's an important tool and can be really useful. Is there kind of a certain style of meditation that you've been practicing or have sort of really resonated with that allows you to catch yourself during the day and just, oh, boom, I can be present right now and just kind of recalibrate and just make sure that everything's going the way that you want, kind of thing?
Yeah, I've practiced for a long time. In college I started, but I don't think I knew what I was doing. That was before it was really trendy. This would have been in, again, 2000, 2001. I went to meditation classes. I was the only guy in the room. It was, and I had friends that made fun of me. So I've kind of in and out for a while. Um, but I think there's been definitely like books. There's been certain things that have helped me along the way. Um, so I fell into Bruce Lee's philosophy really young, and I always loved the martial arts side. But then I think I fell in love with his philosophy even more. And like his, I think Artist of Life is one of the books. So there's a few of them that got me thinking along those lines. That took me into some of the Zen philosophy, Zen Buddhism, and I still practice that. I've read, Miracle of Mindfulness, all those things. I've done Sam Harris's app, which I would totally recommend. I think the first one that I did was the other. It's a really popular mindfulness app. It's
Headspace, was it?
Headspace. Started with Headspace and then gravitated to Sam's stuff, and that just resonates with me to a
Absolutely.
point now where I look at, like, I like to play with my breath. So I think you want to establish a relationship with your breath. And for me, what that is first you just got to have awareness, because most people are oblivious how they're breathing. We're all breathing, but we're not aware of it. So simply learning to slow down and follow your breath, and just that, it's probably it's mindfulness, it's a zen practice. And then from there learn how to manipulate it in different rhythms and different patterns. I mean, I think most people, that if they would just take 5-10 minutes to slow down and watch their breath and not even try to control it, there's going to be huge benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I like that you touched on the old Headspace app there. Andy Kirkpatrick was a chap, I think, from the UK that came up with it, and I remember seeing him on festival circuit. I used to work festival circuit when I was younger. I lived
Yeah,
in an RV for a long time, and I used to go into the festival circuits, and he would pop up doing these workshops, Headspace
right.
workshops they were called. And then fast forward a few years, and digitalism has come in, and it's turned into an app. Fast forward a couple more years, now it's a household name. Everyone knows the Headspace app. But
Yeah, it's cool.
it's really cool. But the waking up app, the Sam Harris approach, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that has been massive for myself. Last year, I came across it through a friend, and that app, I highly recommend it as well, in terms of breaking down the different styles, right, and really just stripping out the bullshit. Because like when everything gets popular, like I'm sure we'll get onto the training fads shortly, a load of bullshit comes in with it. But if you can strip that out, which I think Sam Harris does really well, you can actually see that meditation is just a real simple, not necessarily easy, but a simple tool. And there's various methods you can use, various versions that you can use, yeah, to get astounding benefits. And you said you played around with some sort of cadences there, with like your breathing rhythms and stuff like that. So is that kind of where you're playing around with, like, how long you inhale for, how long you hold, exhale,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of thing?
definitely. I mean, I've dove into some of the research, that looks at, like, activating sympathetic system versus parasympathetic, and all these different patterns. And I like to explore that myself and kind of feel what I can tap into. For example, I'm working on this sleeve on this arm, and I'm getting it done traditional Japanese. So it's a long process, and I was able, with breath holds. And it's interesting because I was using breath holds on the inhale. Now, I don't necessarily know that physiology, but I almost got into I got into one of the deepest meditations I've ever got into, to where almost like I opened up this other dimension. Like, it's bizarre. Like, this kind of like purple space opened up, and I was able to like disassociate myself from the pain. And it felt like the holds on the inhale were facilitating it. Now, I haven't had the time to go back and kind of, okay, reverse engineer that and say, like, what potentially happened. Um, but yeah, I'll go in and I will, I'll nasal breathe, and I'll work on just as slow as I can, trying to minimize the amount of breaths per minute. I'll go, 5 full inhales with the reflexive exhale. There's all these different patterns that I've played with over the years, and I tend to find kind of what works for me. um, I think breath holds help people get drawn in, because I think meditation, really what it is, mindfulness, what it is it's connecting your mind and body, and it's getting you out of your head, right? It's allowing you to tap into the current moment and not live in this headspace. So when you hold your breath and the CO2 increases, you kind of have no other choice but to kind of tap into that sensation. So now you're tapped into what's happening inside your body, and I think it tends to pull you out of your head. So that's how I would kind of layman express it. That, like, people that live in their head, and we all do, right? Like, some people just aren't aware that they're living in this world that they think is real, but it's really their inner experience that they're calling reality or consciousness. And when they learn to pull themselves inward, they can calm down and slow down.
Yeah,
So
fantastic. It's a
yeah.
great tool for that, isn't it? Reflexively pulls you into the moment. I think balance and breathing are two things we're hardwired to um, really know when we're without it. Like, it doesn't take long to realize when you're without oxygen that you need oxygen. That's probably the
Yeah.
fastest input to realize, right? And balance, likewise. You know, as soon as you lose balance, you're aware that you're losing balance. It's an immediate feedback loop. Yeah, they definitely pull you into the moment. When you said the inhalation hold, so is that just like breathing in and then just holding there for a time, just
Yeah.
locked off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get to a point where like I'm probably taking like one breath a minute and just staying with that. And like it's just very calming. And the holds on the inhale have a different feel than the holds on the exhale. Um, so yeah, I am not a super like regimented person by nature. I like flexibility. I realize the benefit of structure, and I think you need that. But I'm one of those people that likes to experiment and play. So with breathing, as I've read more, then even with Sam Harris, I'll go back to his app. I did it consistently for I think I got like 60 days in a row or something, and I'll still go in because I really respect the simplicity and his insight because I think he's a brilliant man. Like he's so good at connecting ideas and just his vocabulary and how he breaks things down. And but from there, like then I want to go and I want to play my own music or no music and I want to play with it and I want to see how I can experience it different so then I can potentially communicate it to people in different ways. But then there are some people that really like buddy of mine, he's very regimented and he's been doing Sam Harris every day. And I talked to him about this and I was like, have you ever thought about like doing it on your own? And he just, no, it's not his style. It doesn't work for him. So I mean, I think to each your own, it's, hey, whatever works for you. Um, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Either way, the can't be denied. The breath is a fantastic tool to either explore with the help of someone guiding you or dive in on your own a little bit, right? It's one of the few things on the planet that's free. So play around with it.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how powerful slowing down can be, but how hard it is for us to do. It really is. It's like, and I believe that maybe that is the one thing that's like the first thing. Like if you can get people to just embrace that. Modern society is so fast, right? It's everything. We have so much to do, and we're bombarded. And there's beauty in that as well, but man, just a little bit of time slowing down can really go a long way, and I think everybody should learn how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a subtle life skill which arguably you can get some mega results out of and carry you a long way. Yeah, fantastic. And I suppose this takes us through to the next sort of part of questions, Brandon. Really, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your training philosophies and kind of how you work with your clients of varying skill levels. Is breathing that something that comes into teaching, like when and coaching with your clients? You kind of educate them a little bit on differences around the diaphragm and what it's like to
Yeah,
hold your breath and stuff like that. Is that something that comes into your kind of philosophy?
yeah, it's pretty much step one because it's again like it still surprises me how you can get elite level athletes that don't use their diaphragm and don't breathe right. And I think we take that for granted. Everybody breathes, so it's kind of hard to say, well, somebody doesn't breathe right, but there are levels to that. And if you can restore that, so like breathing is interesting because the way we breathe will affect our state, right? And our state will affect how we breathe. And breathing is obviously a mindfulness tool and it's a way to tap into the moment. But how you breathe will also impact how you move. So very much airflow affects our movement. So if somebody is certain postures, if they're stuck in postures, actually probably certain shapes of people will dictate their breathing variability, and that might be the limiting factor into somebody's ability to execute a movement. So I mean it's like airflow impacts the skeleton, right? So fundamentally this was a huge step for me in my philosophy is if you understand how a breath in and a breath out should impact our axial skeleton, and not to get too like sciencey, it's just like a good breath in should change the curvatures of our spine. A breath out changes the curvatures of our spine. But if you're stuck in, say, you're stuck in inhalation or exhalation, and that happens, or people's posture kind of is rigid, like that's a big thing, and that probably is the first thing to address, because if you can change somebody's skeletal positioning, now muscles will open up, right? Like that's a concentric eccentric length tension relationship thing. If your pelvis is stuck in a certain orientation because of how you breathe, if you can get somebody to breathe differently, and now that opens up their pelvis, let's say, and their pelvic floor and all these other things, like that's pretty powerful, and you'll get changes quick. So yeah, it's fundamental. It's like I wouldn't. It's definitely one of the first things I introduce. I won't stay there for too long with people, because at the end of the day, I am a trainer, but I want to address that early on.
Early on, yeah, as a foundational part of the puzzle. Yeah, it makes sense. And then, do you go through? Do you use assessment processes with your clients? Say someone new is working with you and they come on board, regardless of their attributes and current sort of training history. Do you assess them before you start working, or is it more just kind of get them in, get them moving, see how they work under load? Like, what's your kind of thinking
Yeah,
behind that?
yeah. I mean, it varies a bit depending on the person, but for the most part, there would be an eval first, and it's a combination of things. And it's you get to a point where you understand, like, you assess joint range of motion at the shoulders, the hips. You look at kind of rib cage. You watch somebody breathe. You can start to piece things together and get an idea. And there's always layers to this, like there's always like first layer compensations that you see, and then if you understand that, you say, well, I probably would see this and this and this. If you see those things, great. It's kind of simple, but it's typically not the way, because there's layers to compensations. Because I think it's impossible to know. The environment matters, history matters, biases matter, perceptions matter. All of these things that factor into who we are as a person. um so it can get complicated, but it's definitely like unraveling. Like, I'm going to look at joint range of motion, I'm going to watch somebody breathe, I'm going to watch them move a bit, I'm going to see if things line up the way I think they should, and then I'm build a plan and say, okay, this person's needs more hip extension. They have a compensation at their ISA, their rib cage makes sense, let's move out of it. And I guess what is cool with that model is, if you understand it, like, you can still train people. Like, if you put people in a good position to squatting isn't, it's a strength exercise, it's an endurance exercise, it's a prehab exercise, right? Versus maybe more of a rigid model, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, squatting can be done safely if it's providing it's used
Yeah,
intelligently, right? It can. There's so many variations of it, and
right,
arguably it's a foundational pattern that we're not quite born with, but at a very young age we do it. So
right.
it's in our lexicon, isn't it? Our movement lexicon early. Yeah, and are there any other sort of elements to your training philosophy? I mean, we've got the breathing in there. We've got kind of joint range of motion and sort of looking at the layers of the assessment. Are there any other things that you kind of have stuck by, and across the board you see results regardless of the person? I know it's difficult because our world is very much a case by case basis, and it depends is very much the popular answer to questions. But are there other things that you've got in your system that kind of you use all the time, that just seem to yield results 9 times out of 10?
I think I've gotten to this point where I look at, like, simple is good. And I think in our industry there is a big, it probably still is a thing where, like, man, we just kind of overcomplicate it. Like, the basic patterns: squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, carrying. Like, some of these things, like, they all work, and it's managing load, managing volume, intensity, those things. Um, I look at my motto is understanding what a good position is. And that's somewhat subjective, but we try to make it as objective as we can. And I would argue that some of these things are objective, and then somebody else would say, no, I don't completely agree. And that's fine, right? Like, I can be open minded that there isn't one way. So I think, as a strength coach, if you're working with athletes, you do want to have a basis of classic periodization, like understanding, volume and intensity management. Like, that matters. And for a while, that wasn't my strength. So I've added that probably in the last 5 years of understanding that research, and understanding how to build plans. But then I also think you don't want a rigid model with that, meaning, like, the body doesn't adapt necessarily like linearly, right? Like you need to understand that if you build a, whatever, a 12-week block plan or whatever it is, that at week 10 it might say we're heavy, and this is our max day or whatever that might be, and your client or your athlete comes in and they're just off, and okay, you got to have a plan B and C, like, right? Like, I think that's another thing, is having a dynamic fluid model that embraces and understands is the complexity of us as humans, that like everything matters. So you're my guy, we're preparing for something and you got in a fight with your spouse or your significant other, and you didn't sleep, and you had too many beers, and you come in, like, I need to like have a relationship with you that you're comfortable in telling me, and then we have to say, you know what, today is like, we're gonna go region today, we're gonna back off, the plan can be variable. I think that's big. And then I think with a lot of strength coaches, there's a miss on the movement variability, play, those things that you see in like the movement world, like the kind of gymnastics, maybe Edo per towel world, that I think are really, really valuable for us as humans, that can be also very valuable for athletes if they're injected correctly, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Exploration.
yeah, exploration of movement, and you always have to be careful, because I think it's like, again, somebody gets into that world and they think everybody needs to be able to do a handstand,
Yeah,
right? And everybody should be doing, um, like gymnastics ring work, and I don't think that's the case, especially for a lot of athletes, because I think it's pulling them way too far out of their specialization, which I think you have to be really careful,
yes,
right? Like
yeah,
like again, like ground force, power, strength is good, like to a certain degree. Those other movement exploration, movement variability things are good to a certain degree. And then it's like, well, what's somebody's goals and how do you direct them towards those goals, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. What's the happy medium? Yeah, exactly. Because as soon as you get someone off the field and onto the rings, you're getting specific at rings now. Like you're
yeah,
you're getting them as a skill. You're going down the skill wormhole of rings, and it's like, well, that's not
exactly.
really going to make them any better on the field, is it? They're going to get better at
No,
rings, but great. I mean,
right.
so
Yeah,
what?
it's like the classic, like really good sports science guy or gal, like arguing with again, the movement exploration guy. They both think they have the answers, and the reality is, like most things in life, it probably is a balance of things,
Yeah,
like not enough variability is bad, too much variability can also be bad. Like a
yeah.
person that's in a skill sport needs to be really good at that skill, and they need to train that because it is specific.
Yeah, that's their priority at the end of the day, especially if they're a competitive athlete, right? I like what you said about
Yeah,
periodization, though. I'm a massive fan of it, but more importantly, flexible periodization. The spreadsheet might say we're
right.
maxing, but the client's
Yeah,
bags under their eyes might say no.
where are you from?
So I'm originally from Italy, but I grew up in the UK, so
Okay.
south of England, around sort of the London kind of area. So
And now you're in
I'm in Vancouver now. Yeah, in
yeah,
British.
so you've been all over the place. Yeah, there's a guy, I want to say he was the head of maybe the UK sports science department. His name is John Keeley, and he's it'd be good to plug this, because these articles for coaches are really good. He's got a free article, you just, if you Google it, John Keeley, Keily, the theory of periodization,
Okay.
and it's his paper talks. It's like, that was a big eye opener for me years ago. It's like, okay, this makes sense. Like, you need a plan. You want to know where you're going, and you want to understand the hormones you're looking to affect, and the stress effect you're looking for, and there has to be build and all of these things. But like, to hold somebody to that is arrogant or is not intelligent, because of the dynamic nature of us, right? It's like, again, everything matters, the environment, the situation, those things, and you have to try to take that in consideration. I think good coaches do, right? Like,
Yeah,
good coaches have a feel for it,
yeah,
but that's hard to teach. It's
yeah.
like, how do you develop this feel?
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
an experiential thing, isn't it? Yeah, time in the trenches. You should be able to get that with a good eye. it seems like a lot of the literature around periodization came out of the Soviet bloc, and they
Yeah,
had
old school.
a massive pool of people, right? Where if you just fell down dead, you were swept to the back of the queue, and someone else took your place. And then at the end of it, they had a sort of biased set of results. They're like, look how well our period like models work because we've got all
Right.
these studs left. It's like, yeah, but what they didn't tell you is 3,000 people didn't make it, and they were very much to the T. When actually, yeah, there's use there, but you've got to be able to look at your client on the day, haven't you, and be able to make your judgments on the day. And I think there's a couple of more books coming into light now, yeah, around the flexible periodized model, which is very interesting, allowing a redundancy to be built into the system so that it can still work on a sort of
Yeah.
net gain, but
Yeah.
you're not too rigid. But then going to the other camp, the movement man bun camp, I actually really like the approach. I think Ido was the first person to coin it, but I actually had my own realization with this from jujitsu, was what is your relationship with the floor? And I
Yeah.
really like that as a kind of question, because my relationship with the floor is rolling around with sweaty people in jujitsu. That's my relationship. And it is a fantastic one because it's such a crazy set of dynamics. But what is your relationship with the floor? How often are you down there? I had a few coaches on that have talked about the importance of tumbling and learning how to fall properly,
Yeah.
regardless of what your sport is. Actually, I think as a life skill, learning to fall and making friends with the floor is quite a good one. So I think, yeah, when you kind of take those two, yeah, sort of your sports science and your man bun crew, and you cross over,
Right.
you're on a something quite
Yeah.
decent. Yeah,
Yeah. I agree that's kind of how I think of myself. I don't know how, like, it's like to define who, like, kind of where I fit into that, but I would agree. That's kind of how I think of myself is, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a meathead, especially if you're an intelligent one and if you're after getting stronger, like those things work. But then, don't ignore the other side, the man bun, like I love being barefoot. I love getting vitamin D, I love learning new things and being exposed to, you think of like improvisation as like, on the man bun side, like this ability to link things and be fluid and flow and not repeat. There's a lot there. There's a lot there for the brain.
yeah,
Um, there really is, that I think a lot of people miss that. They
yeah,
do. Like they don't have that complexity of organizing their body, um, like at all. So
yeah.
that's a valuable thing to pick up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We all know a meathead that would struggle to play a game of dodgeball, and but we also
Right.
know plenty of people that will be really good at dodgeball that wouldn't be able to back squat their own body weight. So it's kind of
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you've got to hybridize both, haven't you? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
There
that's
you go.
where the magic lies.
Yep.
Absolutely. Mobility was a buzz term in the UK. Wow, in my
Yeah.
experience, 4 or 5 years ago, it suddenly blew up, and I wasn't quite sure whether it was catalyzed through the CrossFit world or Instagram becoming popular or whatever it was, but it became a thing. Um, Back in the late 70s and 80s, bodybuilding and aesthetics and hypertrophy work was a thing. What are some of the kind of fads you've seen, Brandon, in your time in the trenches that you've seen come into play? They've become really popular, and then maybe a year or two later, they've kind of faded out. Are there any ones that really kind of stick out in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you nailed it. Mobility was and probably still is a big one, and I was
Yeah,
probably a little bit of guilty falling into that. Um, but fortunately for me, I don't think it's bad. I think again, like breathing patterns being right and solid positions will trump everything else. Um, like good positions under load, and then again, it depends on kind of the context. I don't think most people need to spend hours upon hours working on these in range positions. They can get a lot of that from moving and moving clean and good. High intensity training, right? that's
oh
that's a
yeah,
huge one. Like,
it's coming back.
yeah, people that think every workout, they have no aerobic base, they have no base of strength, they have no foundation, and if they're not just in a pool of sweat, the workout wasn't a good workout. Like what that is actually doing to their system, it's nothing wrong with working hard. But again, I think we're misinterpreting like things, like, and the average person doesn't know. They have no base, right? Like you have to have a certain level of understanding to have a good bullshit detector,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, most people don't. So
Yeah.
they don't, it makes sense. Like I want to lose weight, I want to look good, I want to like feel good. So I must need to just work hard as I can every time. So those are probably the two biggest ones is
Yeah.
the high intensity like boot camp style classes that again, there's nothing wrong with them. And then yeah, mobility still is one. You get that a lot. Like it's
Yeah.
so, and we utilize that. We utilize FRC in our training. I think it has a place.
Yeah, agreed. What's interesting is you get these systems, if you like. I think it's just that maybe it's the age we're living in where you're able to unpack an idea into such detail. FRC is a great example. Mobility as a concept or as a skill, and you can unpack it to the nth degree and create a whole system out of it where the newcomer might walk into that system thinking that is the universe. That's the entire that's all the information you need. I've got it right here because it's just it seems like Instagram and YouTube, and it's just kind of there's a trap there when actually it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the puzzle. um
Yeah.
and yeah,
Right.
mobility seemed to be kind of the big one, as if it's going to be your magic pill that's going to make everything else kind of
Yeah.
just seamless. And then yeah, the high intensity world seemed to be more for like the complete newbie who's maybe never trained before. Like you say, they equate hard work and kind of they know hard work's an element, and they know this is where they want to be, and they think that high intensity is the bridge across the canyon kind of thing, when actually yeah, it has its place, but arguably balls to the wall and chalk outlines are only going to get you so far.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, I wanted to get into the meat and potatoes, as we say back in the UK, Brandon, of your work recently with Mr. Sugar Sean O'Malley, who
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of since his contender days, and watched him evolve and increase his knowledge base and sort of pursue his athletic career in the UFC. And just wow, I mean, force to be reckoned with. And you started working with him, or have been working with him and preparing him for a various host of things. And I wonder if we could sort of dive into that. I appreciate there might be a level of confidentiality to a degree because he's a competitive athlete, and he doesn't want to give away all the secrets. But how did that come about? I mean, I think you're both in Arizona, from what I can tell. How did that
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
about, working with Sugar Sean, and kind of how did he find you, and that sort of, where did that start?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, Sean is, I mean, it's been really, really cool for, he blows my mind almost on a daily, weekly basis with his commitment to growth, his mindset. Um, he really is like, I've been fortunate to be around a lot of elite athletes, and he's up there, if not from a mindset standpoint, from his commitment to growth, he's as good, if not better, than anybody I've met. And he's 25 years old, and he's like, he just, I really believe he's going to just keep getting better. And that, what he went through with his time off, I think was one of it, probably the best thing that ever happened to him, because it humbled him a little bit. He was able to invest time in training and building a base, and I think really like just looking at life slightly different, because he experienced like, it wasn't overnight success, but it was, that's about as close as you're gonna get. The big knockout on the Contender Series, Snoop Dogg. Next thing you know, you wake up and you got, I don't know, 400,000 IG followers. But I've known Sean for a while. I've worked with a few other UFC athletes that are like from similar camps, and with those guys, what I kind of ended up being was a part of their team more from a movement quality standpoint, like my basis in like good movement, and like almost more of a recovery standpoint. Like I would be, I would see some of these other guys like while they're in camp, maybe 2 times a week, help them with their breathing, help them kind of reset their body and down regulate their system, because they were doing all of their other stuff everywhere else. And with Sean, I met him again, probably the first time. It's probably 5-6 years ago, and I remember thinking like, man, this kid just he looks different, he moves different, and he was really interested in like learning about what I was teaching, which is pretty pretty cool and maybe not common for a super young kid. And we just kind of got to know each other. I was helping him for basically camps and then he ended up getting suspended, but on a smaller level, on less of a capacity. And we just clicked, and at some point, it was like, hey, like, I would like to be connected. We talked to him about being his strength and conditioning coach and helping him manage that, and he was all in. So this will be our full this will be our third full fight camp together
Amazing.
as his strength and conditioning coach. But during his suspension, we spent a lot of time together,
Right.
and like we were able to like keep again build his base, because he's one of these guys that is super athletic, super gifted, but he's a white belt in the gym, and he needed just like he was always hurt. Um, he needed to build a base. He needed to build some structure so that he could support his athleticism,
Yeah.
and that's what we did. Yeah,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, he seems like maybe you can correct me on this, but I don't think he had much of an athletic sporting childhood in the traditional sense. He wasn't a multi-sport athlete. He wasn't a Division One NCAA. He was more of just like a computer gamer, kind of
yeah,
sharp brain. And then it seems like that sharp brain has kind of propelled him. Now he started to go through the martial arts, and his physical capacity is accelerating at a rate where to almost keep up with his own mental capacity in a sense. So it's interesting, like you said, you've got to build a base so his body can handle what his brain is capable of, kind of thing. Because otherwise, he's hitting pads at such a degree that he's hurting his wrist
yeah.
or something. It's like, yeah, well, we've got to build a bit of structure and a bit of a foundation there. So was that a case of just getting him under a bit of load and kind of getting him, yeah, like you say, stable in positions and loading
Yeah,
him up, and a bit of just general strength work?
for sure. Yeah, a lot of just GPP stuff, to be honest, initially, and ISOs, and like teaching him how to manage his pelvis in space. I think that's a big one. Is like people like intra-abdominal pressure, and they're actually able to create a brace, and they understand what managing the pelvis is as they move. Um, so that's huge, right? That's like, okay, and then let's add a little bit of hypertrophy. Let's add a little bit of strength. Let's thicken him out a little bit, and then now that has progressed into strength and power, and just kind of adding on to what he already does. I think a good analogy is like he's one of these like kangaroo guys. Like he's really good at creating like pop and relax. He's fluid, that lanky guy that doesn't look strong but is really strong. But he had no chassis. Like it's like if you put a Ferrari engine on you know a uh, a Honda a Honda Civic base, like that engine is going to destroy that car. And that's a kind of a simple analogy for athletes. Is a guy that tends to be pretty naturally springy and explosive tends to need to build more of the other side so that they can manage that springiness. Like you've got to build them a base, and then at some point you start to go back in the direction of let's really maximize what you do well naturally. Let's maximize your strengths and let's minimize your weaknesses. But I think that evolves a little bit depending on where you're at with the person, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what natural qualities they kind of bring to the table, I suppose, because every athlete kind of has their own strengths, I suppose, that they bring to the table, maybe naturally or just they're gifted in that way. Yeah, he is quite poppy, isn't he? Like you're right, and he's long. He's very long limbed for his
Yeah.
height, so he's got long
And he
levers there.
he is really strong. Like he's not a weak guy. He just, again, the guys that tend to be springy tend to kind of rely on passive stability from my experience. They tend to want to use joints for stability. So it's almost like you got to teach them to be active and to, again, a lot of ISOs, like managing their ventral cavity, their rib cage, and their pelvis. Get that down, and then let them do what they do. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably worth mentioning as well. I mean, I know Tim Welch is his friend and coach as well. He's a very interesting chap, mastermind, I think, sort of pulling the
yeah,
strings behind the scenes. Did you
yeah,
sort of sit down with him and kind of discuss like where where this is going? Because it seems like there's often there's a gap between communication traditionally between the S and C coach and then skills coach, or whoever's in charge of, in this case, martial arts coaches, if you like, and they rarely sit down and talk to each other on actually
Yeah.
structuring the schedule. Do you actually kind of communicate with Tim and try and figure out like how this is all gonna, how the camp is gonna work itself out?
Yeah, we typically have a sit down the start of the camp, and and say, hey, this is, a lot of times I'm listening to them because my background is not MMA. So, and I've been around these guys. I definitely I have a knack for it. I have a read for it, but I always kind of default to them on that side, and then explain how the strength and conditioning fits in, and make sure that there is synergy. Like, a lot of it is just like, okay, if we're at this early phase, he doesn't need to be going hard all the time. Like, there's let's keep his heart rate under, let's keep his heart rate under his threshold. Let's work these things, and then still have flexibility. Like, I think, let those guys be artists, but understand, like, okay, for this block, this 2 week phase, these are the priorities, right? We're working on these things, these energy systems. Um, and it's been really cool with those guys. Though they're such good friends, their relationship is so cool. Um, it's really, really cool to see. And Tim, and I tell him this, is like, he's an elite coach. He has a really good ability to manage energy and understand Sean and say the right things at the right time. It's, again, really cool to be around.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then not old, right? I mean, and often you get coaches with experience into their 40s and 50s, and then they've been through the trenches for so long that they've got that accrued level of knowledge. It makes sense. It marries up to why they're so good. But Tim, I think, is, maybe I'm wrong, but he's under 30 years old.
He just turned 30, and
It's so
Sean's 25. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and yet
So
he's like got the mind of like a 60-year-old man that's been through the trenches for years. It's a god-given talent there, I think. On top of, I mean, I know he's put a lot of time in training too. Let's not fall short on that. He's been training for a long, long time. But yeah, fascinating. Like you say, he's got a very experienced mind and an eye for a man of 30 years old.
yeah, they both, again, coming back to just having growth mindset, they both live in that space.
Right.
They're watching podcasts, they're listening to stuff, and um, I think that's huge. Is like, they're both addicted to growth, which I think is a big piece of the equation. um, and not they're not afraid to go against the grain in a lot of ways, but also probably even in training and coaching, because there is like this kind of dogma in, especially the MMA world, that thinks you have to spar, and you have to, and you probably do to a certain degree, right? But you want to minimize taking those head blows, and you can build skill and build stamina and conditioning without necessarily having to spar all the time. And both of those guys are on top of that. They're really good at understanding that that's not, that just because everybody else does it doesn't mean we have to do it that way. And I think you're starting to see that in MMA. You're starting to hear coaches talk about that more, that like they get it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's the dog eat dog world of, yeah, last man standing was a very old school gladiatorial approach, wasn't it? And it got MMA arguably maybe to where it is today, because you've got a lot of tough bastards that came out of it. But I think time will tell, maybe in 10, 15 years, when someone like Sugar Sean's brain health is perhaps leagues above someone else who took a battering. You'll realize that the smart approach to training, like you say, you don't have to go balls to the wall sparring all the time to get the same energy system development that you could perhaps do in the gym. Is a smarter approach, isn't it? If you had the choice, what would you like to have for a camp length, Brandon, for someone like Sean? Would it be like an 8 week or a 12 week, or what kind of is a good time frame for you to kind of get the work done that you need to?
Yeah, 8 to 6 is perfect. And probably with Sean, it's probably even closer to 6, because he doesn't get out of shape. He lives such a healthy lifestyle. Like, I mean, he smokes some marijuana. Everybody knows that. But I mean, I'll tell you what. Like, I did a podcast with them a while ago, and he said something. I was like, man, that's so insightful for this young guy. Like, he's like, yeah, marijuana can be abused. Not everybody should smoke it. And I was like, "Yeah, okay, there you go. Like, yeah, like everything can be abused. Not everything, but substances can be abused. And I think marijuana can be a positive aspect of people's lives. It can be very negative. Alcohol is the same, you know what I mean? Like, but people just have preconceived, um, understandings of these stimulants or these substances in different ways. But because he stays in such good shape, like the kid loves training, he eats healthy, he sleeps, he ice baths, he meditates like every day. Like he loves it. He doesn't need, like, it's just a ramp it up, right? Like I don't feel like we lost really anything from last camp. And he only like really, fortunately he's been healthy the last two fights, like first round, knockout finish. But because of that, I don't think you need that much time. I think 6 weeks can still work, but eight's probably optimal.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, you can get what you need done. It was interesting that you said in his suspension time that he would ask you questions behind what you were teaching. I find that's quite rare in the combat sports world. Very often the knucklehead stereotype is a stereotype for a reason. Very often fighters are good at doing what they're told, from the coach. They kind of automaton go into it, but they very rarely ask, why are we doing this? So I find that fascinating. That's a testament to his growth mindset, I suppose, that he was asking you, a little bit deeper. Why are we doing this kind of thing? And in those 2 years, he got to really pick your brains, as it were, beyond just following instruction. It's kind of
Yeah.
the coach's dream, really, isn't it? Someone who's capable but also intrigued.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. For me, like at this point of my career, really anybody that just wants to accept being coached
Yeah,
is what it's about. That pro athlete regular, it's like just, I love the saying. It's I think it's a Zen Buddhism saying, but it's, wisdom is is itself seeking for wisdom, or it is wisdom that is seeking for wisdom. It's like you're if you're looking to grow and you're seeking out wisdom, that is wisdom in itself, right? Like, so by being curious, by asking why, by understanding, like we all have our biases and we all have certain lenses, but trying to be aware of that. I think that applies to like everything. Yeah, that could apply to certain our situation in our country right now with the race stuff. Like, if people would just step back and like really try to understand the other sides of the argument, and try to really put themselves in somebody else's shoe and be interested and be curious and ask why, and try to gain an understanding, I think we'd be in a it's a good place to be.
yeah, absolutely. Question marks more powerful than just a punctuation tool, isn't it? It goes
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
deeper than
that's
that.
good.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
goes a lot deeper than that. Do you train any martial arts yourself, Brandon? I know you said it's not your background, but have you dabbled in any kind of bits and bobs?
I've done a bit of jujitsu, and I I keep telling, like, I want to really get into it. I just haven't made the time. But I'm fascinated by it, and really the sport itself. I think it's just is so cool. So yeah, not a lot. I was kind of a traditional baseball, football, basketball guy growing up, and then yeah, like training. Like right now, my practice is like training. My moving and training is like, that's what I love. That's my passion. So I've got to give it a little bit of space to open up space for something like jujitsu. But I know I'd love it.
Yeah, I think you definitely would, with a mind like yours and a curious nature, and obviously in good physical condition. I think you'd excel fast and take a lot from it. And I'm
Yeah,
sure just you've had a few light bulb moments from the little bit that you've played around with. It's a very powerful martial art, as we've seen in the competitive arena. It works pragmatically, but it's also as a life system, I think, which is arguably something that will get unpacked more over the years as more people do it. It's phenomenally powerful and is up there with the kind of revelations that Bruce Lee was talking about in his kind of own martial endeavors. It's got all the information you need within it to discover about yourself and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, and I think it looks like Arizona, you've got a fantastic access to really high level jits guys down there and crews. So I'm sure, yeah, if you could set aside, I don't know what the optimal time frame is really for jiu-jitsu. I'd probably say twice a week. 2 classes a week is a good foundation point, sort of 3 hours a week to kind of really start prying your brain cells open and getting some revelations. Yeah, because it's so much more than just sweaty hugs, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's something primal about that we need as people, as humans, that connection, and even that, that uh, sweating, rolling, grabbing that we benefit from for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You see lion cubs do it, don't you? Animals play with each other in a rough and tumble fashion throughout nature. A lot of the mammals, they do that kind of thing, and I think we're no different. Yeah, we do crave it. I mean, the masculine archetype probably craves it maybe a little bit more, but I suppose the beauty of jiu-jitsu is it's designed ultimately for the woman to succeed. So it's not gender bias in that sense. It's perfect for everybody. So yeah, hopefully you'll be able to free up some time after this madness calms down a little bit and get a bit of training in. Yeah, that'll be brilliant. Get Sugar Sean to show you a couple of flying triangles and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Brandon, when it comes for people to like to work with you, are there kind of any prerequisites? I mean, I would imagine location is semi-important, but how would people sort of find out a bit more about working with you on a private basis, where your gym is located and stuff like that?
Yeah. No, appreciate that. Yeah. So we have a bunch of different levels. So obviously, in person, one on one here at the gym in Scottsdale, that's a great option. And I'll have people that'll come in and do an evaluation and do a session or two and then leave, and I'll build them a plan. So I mean, that's also an option. We have an app, so I will build people plans in our app. So we'll do FaceTime evaluations, Zoom evaluations, and then build custom plans. So that's another really cool option. And then we also have just kind of one-off plans that you can purchase through our website. They'd be like, hip mobility and and conditioning plans there as well. And I'm actually in the works of building like an MMA conditioning strength training plan that hopefully
Amazing.
I'll have done soon. My Instagram, so Brandon_PFS. So my gym is Premier Fitness System. So Brandon_PFS. And my bio link there, I've got a few free plans that I love to give out. I've got a conditioning plan, a body weight plan, a mobility prep plan. Those are all free. So that's definitely my Instagram is good. And then premierfitnesssystems.com is our website for our gym.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I'll make sure in the show notes then that we get links to all that stuff because, like I said, followed you since a few years back and watched all sorts of wicked content coming from your end. And I like the way you're open minded, and I think that is a testament to your your Zen practice and your ability to cultivate awareness into your actual career, if you like, into a world which is arguably thought of as either man buns or meatheads, and you're able to calibrate, interesting and intelligent approaches. And now that you're working with Sugar Sean, I think really it was only a matter of time before some like two minds like that cross paths. So yeah, I'll make sure we get all the links up there so people can find out
I
how to
appreciate that.
contact you and stuff. Yeah,
Thank you, man.
absolutely, mate. Yeah, resources are a big, they've helped me, they've helped you along the way, and it's nice to pay it forward. And even if it's just a clicking on a link, it might blow someone's mind, mightn't it? So you never know. Amazing, Brandon. We've cracked out a good hour there, mate. I appreciate you got a ton of stuff to do in the rest of your day. So, thank you so much for coming on, mate. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I appreciate your time and everything you're doing. Keep doing it, man. I think with everything going on, I just come back to the importance of connection and authentic connection. And I get that from you. And I admire what you're doing and keep growing. And let's stay connected. Let's keep growing. Let's try to have some fun at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And if the airports ever open back up again, I'll have to pop down to Arizona, mate, whilst I'm in this hemisphere.
Yeah.
Come and say hello down at PFS. Absolutely.
Love to have you, brother. Yeah, appreciate it, man.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
This episode of the Move Mind podcast was brought to you by CBD Mountain, the sport and fitness CBD. Head over to cbdmountain.com for a range of soft gels, skin balms, oils and vapes, and purchase online and have the premium quality CBD delivered directly to your door. cbdmountain.com.